The people of Amoket say the gods don't test men with fire. They test them with anonymity. Before continuing this wonderful story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. I read every one. The sun had barely kissed the earth when Obasi, hidden behind the name Terry, arrived at the House of Trade. The rain had only just stopped, but the mud still wept underfoot, thick and clinging. He dragged his broom like a warrior's spear across the cracked stone floors. No one greeted him, not even the gods of the compound. He wore a threadbare wrapper. His once glorious skin was masked with charcoal and palm ash. His back bent like an old tree. His voice, when he used it, was hoarse from disuse. But inside, Obasi burned. He was the forgotten son of Chief Ume, who had died under suspicion and scandal. Wealth was still his. Influence too. But trust, love, all had been devoured by gold-hungry hands. Women had kissed his lips, only to bite his purse. Friends had poured wine only to drain his spirit. So he came here to sweep floors until he found one soul who saw the man beneath the dust. The trade house was noisy. Men yelled. Women bargained. Obasi moved like a ghost, noting who thanked their food and who spat in the hands that made it. Then he saw her. She passed quietly, shoes worn, hair in braids tucked with discipline. She bowed to elders, greeted the crippled potter. Her laughter was not loud, but it curled in the air like smoke from sacred wood. He didn't know her name, but that night as wind rattled his hut and the fire crackled like memories, he whispered, "If she can see me now, then I will know she is real." And the wind seemed to answer, "Wait." The morning mist hung low over Amoki, wrapping every tree and hut in a hush that felt like prayer. Lummi rose before dawn, her breath fogging in the cold air as she fetched water from the stream. The village was quiet, but inside her, a storm brewed softly. Born into the hands of a mat weaver and raised by hardship, she had learned to move through the world without ripples. While others chased wealth with sharpened tongues, Lummi chased peace with quiet steps. She had seen the sweeper before. He moved like someone who carried more weight than just his broom. His hands were cracked like dry earth, but his eyes held the slow stillness of a river that had witnessed too much. As she sat beneath the neem tree beside the trade house, opening her leaf-wrapped breakfast of roasted yam and palm oil, Lummi watched him again. He bent over, broom scratching across stone, unbothered by the laughter around him. His silence was not weakness. It was armor. She saw how the guards shoved past him, how the traders hissed when he crossed their path. Yet his head never bowed in shame, only in patience. She rose and walked to him. "Good afternoon," she said, voice barely louder than the breeze. He froze, looked. Something flickered behind his soot-darkened eyes. "Thank you," he replied, as if the words were unfamiliar, forgotten. That night, as clouds gathered and thunder stirred in the hills, Obasi lay awake on his raffia mat, listening to the rain tap like fingers on a drum. He stared at the ceiling and saw her smile carved in the shadows. And in the silence between lightning and thunder, he let himself feel hope. The day was warmer than usual, the air thick with the scent of sweat and smoked fish. Obasi was already drenched by the time the sun stood straight above Amoko's sky. The trade house buzzed with its usual noise, arguments over prices, laughter from mouths that rarely meant it. He had just finished sweeping the west corridor when she appeared again. Today, her wrapper was patched at the corner, and her feet were bare, yet she moved with a grace that made Silk jealous. She placed a small bundle near his bucket. "You work hard," she said softly. "Eat before the ants do." Then she walked away. Obasi stared at the gift as if it were fire. Slowly, he unwrapped the leaves. Inside, beans, soft, spiced, still warm. It smelled of home, of afternoons he hadn't remembered in years. He ate it sitting on the stone floor, not minding the eyes of the proud. Every bite quieted something loud inside him, something broken. Just as he finished, Chief Bala stormed past, his sandals flapping. "You again, broom boy," he spat. "Sweep faster, or go back to whatever pit you crawled from." Obasi bowed, not to the insult, but to keep the fire in his chest from escaping through his eyes. That night, Obasi lit a small flame in his hearth. The empty leaf wrap sat beside it, not burnt. He stared into the fire and saw a vision, not of a queen or riches, but of a quiet girl offering beans with no witness. The hut creaked with wind. Rain tapped again. The fire hissed as if jealous of her warmth. She saw me, he thought, and she fed me, not my hunger, but my worth. It began with a distant thunder, low and slow, like a sleeping lion stretching its limbs. The village of Amoki was caught between sun and storm, the sky undecided, much like Abasi's heart. He had swept the southern corridor of the trade house, his back aching when he felt it, her shadow before her voice. Lami stood a few feet away, her face lit by something softer than sunlight. "You haven't eaten," she said. "I'm fine," Abasi answered. Though hunger clawed at his ribs, she didn't argue. Instead, she sat beside him on the low stone ledge, unwrapping half her cassava cake and pushing it toward him. "I can share." He hesitated, not because of pride, but because something holy lives in small kindnesses, and he feared defiling it with his hands. Still, he reached out. Their fingers brushed. It was brief, accidental. Yet in that moment, the wind shifted. Clouds moved faster. The neem tree above them groaned as if it had heard a prophecy. Abasi ate slowly, tasting not just food but gentleness. Lami watched him, then looked away. She didn't need thanks. She only needed silence to hold its shape. Later that night, thunder cracked open the heavens. Abasi sat by his fire, dripping from the walk home, his wrapper soaked through. He stared at his hand, the one that touched hers, and whispered, "If the gods mark this moment, let them speak in dreams." He fell asleep to the sound of rain, hammering the thatch above, and somewhere in the rhythm of it he thought he heard a voice say, "She is your storm, but she may also be your shelter." The next day dawned with skies so clear they felt suspicious. The Moki looked too peaceful, as if the village held its breath. At the trade house, a man stood on the upper veranda, surveying all like a hawk hungry for weakness. His name was Bela, the overseer. His robes gleamed, his sandals carved from antelope hide, but beneath the scent of imported oil, there was rot. He watched Lami from above. She had just did her documents to the records clerk, and was walking away, unaware of his eyes. She did not laugh at his jokes. She did not linger in doorways. She did not flirt for favors, and that made her a puzzle. Bilal intended to break. That afternoon, he summoned her. "You're different," he said, swirling palm wine in a calabash. "You don't play games like the others." "I come to work, sir," Lami replied, eyes low. "And go home alone?" he asked, voice coated in honey. She said nothing. "I can change your life, Lami. A better role, fewer tasks, even a house, if you let me show you favor." She looked up, eyes calm. "No, thank you." He blinked. "You're rejecting me." "I'm walking away," she said, rising. And she did. Later Obasi saw her pass him by with steady steps, but a clenched jaw. He knew that look. He had worn it once, when someone powerful thought their touch was lost. That night, the fire in Obasi's hut burned hotter than usual. He placed dry wood on it, not for warmth, but to remind himself, predators wear perfume too. And sometimes, the strongest girl in the village walks home holding back tears. The wind had calmed, but the village had not. Words moved faster than storms in Amok. And that morning, whispers curled through the trade house like smoke through keyholes. She gave him food. They say she walks with him behind the courtyard. Lami, with the broom man? Tisk, the cleaner, the girl, together, impossible. But tongues needed no proof, only silence to fill. Lami heard it first in the changing tones. A clerk who once greeted her, now avoided eye contact. A girl in the weaving room snickered when she passed. Even her friend, Titi, looked uneasy. "Be careful, Lami," she said at last. "Some men wait in shadows for women who shine. He may be poor, but that doesn't mean he's harmless." Lami's heart stung. Titi, no, Obasi, had never asked for anything, never demanded, never followed her, only swept, only listened, only existed with dignity. But now doubt snuck in like a snake through a cracked door. Later, as rain threatened again, she saw him by the well, scooping water. His back was turned, but she knew the slope of his shoulders. She almost waved, almost. Then she walked past. That night, Obasi felt the change. He always felt changes, It was in the way people looked through you, instead of at you. He stared into the small broken mirror tied to his wall, a shard from a past life, and asked, who do they see when they look at me? A cleaner, a liar, a beggar wrapped in dust. But deeper still, a more painful question rose. Who does she see now? Outside, the wind stirred again, and this time, the fire struggled to stay lit. The sky that night hung heavy like a soaked cloth. Even the crickets sang in slow, uncertain rhythm. Inside his hut of dry palm reeds and mud, Obasi watched his fire cough weak flames and then die. 3 times in a row, each time he tried to relight it, the wind blew harder. He took it as an omen. Lami had walked past him today, again with that same polite smile people wear when they've already decided you no longer matter. He had tried to catch her eye, to offer a word, even just a nod, but she kept moving, quiet, careful, distant. He sat in the dark, the scent of ash clinging to his skin. In his hands was the last leaf wrap she gave him. He had saved it out of habit, like an offering. Now he stared at it like it might speak. Have I lost her? He whispered. But the wind gave no reply. He remembered the way she first looked at him, with calm, not pity, with interest, not judgment. That gaze had opened something ancient in his chest, something no gold or title ever had. But now, she looked at him like he was a stain on a new wrap. His heart pulled back like a drumskin, drying in the sun, tight, brittle, waiting for the crack. Outside, the moon hid behind clouds. Inside, Obasi whispered, let this season pass. Let the dust settle. Let her see me again. But that night, the fire did not return, and neither did her eyes. The following morning, Amokth wore its usual disguise, sunlight and noise. But Obasi knew better. Beneath it, rumors moved like termites under floorboards. He swept the outer courtyard slower than usual. His hands obeyed, but his spirit wandered. She must know by now, he thought, that I'm not who I pretend to be. Not fully. He hadn't told her. Not about his past. Not about his father's name, or the lands he owned quietly in the east. He'd wanted her to know him for his presence, not his purse, for his patience, not his power. But perhaps that silence had cost him more than pride. He glanced up and saw her, Lomi, speaking with Titi near the palm stand. She looked guarded, her hands folded, her smile thin. He remembered what his mother used to say. When a woman folds her hands while you speak, it means she's folding her trust. Still, he moved toward her, not too fast, just enough to be noticed. She saw him, nodded briefly, then turned away. No words, just the back of her head. It hit harder than insult. Later, back in his hut, Obasi pulled out a box from beneath the floor mat. Inside, the real him, a fine tunic of hand-woven cotton, a gold pendant, a letter with his family seal. He stared at them like strangers. I should have told her, he whispered. He lit a small oil lamp and watched its flame dance like a mocking spirit. Then he blew it out. Some truths burn brighter when kept hidden, but some loves die in that darkness. And he wasn't sure anymore which path he had chosen. The afternoon was thick with heat and buzzing with tension. Chief Bala walked the upper balcony of the trade house like a hawk that had tasted blood. He had heard the rumors. The cleaner and the quiet girl. Foolishness, he thought, but still, a threat to his pride. If Lami gave her heart to a broom man, what did that say about him? He called her to his office. The room smelled of perfume and rotting cola. His slippers were off. His feet rested on a stool made of elephant hide. You look tired, he said as she entered. I'm fine, Lami replied. I hope the company is treating you well. She nodded. Because some people here may distract you, lead you into small corners, make you think small dreams. But you're meant for more. She said nothing. You know, he added, voice oiled. If you want to grow fast here, you should stay close to those who lead, not those who mock. That was it. A warning wrapped in a smile. She bowed slightly. Thank you, sir, and left. But inside her heart raced. The way he said mop. It stung, not because she was ashamed of Obasi, but because the world had decided what he was. That evening she found herself staring into a basin of water, her own reflection rippling with her breath. "Did I judge too soon?" she whispered. "Or did he deceive me first?" At the same, Obesi stood by the edge of the village stream, watching his own reflection shimmer and fade. They both stared into mirrors that refused to stay still, and both asked the same question. "What if I was wrong about you?" The night was quiet, almost too quiet. Even the frogs had forgotten their song. Lami returned home with dust on her feet and a weight she couldn't name on her chest. But before she could open her door, she saw it, there on the mat, a bundle wrapped in cloth, a small bouquet of wildflowers, a note tied with twine. She stood frozen. Her heart thumped. The night air cooled her skin. She looked left, right, no one. She knelt. The flowers smelled like the stream after rainfall. The cloth held a parcel of cooked rice, pepper stew, and fresh mango slices. On the note, a single line, "To the one whose kindness is never forgotten." No name, no signature. She took the items inside, but her mind remained at the doorstep. Obesi, no. He was too proud, too simple, too honest. Or was he? Was this a trick to win her back? She paced the room, touched the flowers, read the note again. The words were soft, but the silence between them was louder. She didn't eat. She didn't smile. That night, she lay beneath her raffia mat, listening to the wind through the cracked window. Her eyes wide open. "Two kind men hide behind gifts," she whispered. "Or worse, do liars wrap their guilt in flowers?" Obesi sat beside his oil lamp, staring at a folded piece of parchment. His heart beat like festival drums. Fast, anxious, too loud for such a small hut. The letter wasn't grand, just a few lines, but it said what he couldn't. "I never wanted your heart to feel cheap. Only free. If you need space, I'll wait. If you need truth, I'll speak. Just don't shut the door without looking back." He sealed it with palm resin, no name, just words. He left it with a parcel of food he'd made himself, not because he thought it would impress her, but because he couldn't sleep another night knowing he hadn't tried. She had stopped looking at him like he mattered, but he still looked at her like she was the last piece of light in a dimming world. As he placed the bundle by her doorstep under the full moon, the air was heavy with dew and unsaid things. He didn't knock. He didn't wait. He just walked back slowly, barefoot, the ground soft from yesterday's rain. With every step, a voice echoed inside. "What if she never forgives you?" But deeper still was a smaller voice, one that whispered, "But what if she does?" By morning a moke buzzed. Whispers flared through the trade house like dry grass catching flame. She found flowers on her doorstep. "They say he's sending her food now. That sweeper must be cunning." It didn't take long for Bala to hear. And once he did, the smirk returned to his face, like a mask he never really took off. "She's being hunted," he told a clerk, "and the hunter wears poverty like perfume." He summoned Sheba, one of the sly-tongued women in accounts. She whispered to Lamy over lunch, "You know why he's doing this, right? You got a raise. People talk." Lamy's fork paused midair. "He waited till you had a house, a salary, a title. Now he remembers he loves you." Lamy's heart squeezed. Obasi had said little, given even less, never once asked her for anything. But still, the doubt crept in like smoke, under a door. At her desk that afternoon, she could barely type. Every keystroke echoed louder than her breath. The flowers, the note, his eyes, were they all part of a script? Or was she the one writing scenes in her head, while he simply stood quietly on stage, offering nothing but truth? That evening, she walked home slower than usual, and though the streets of Amokig were alive with voices, all she could hear were her own thoughts. If he lied about who he is, what else is he hiding? But deep in her chest, another whisper rose. Or, what if he's telling the truth, and you're the one walking away too soon? The sky above flickered with the first signs of a coming storm, and so did her heart. It wasn't planned. Lami didn't wake that morning intending to follow Obasi through the winding paths of Amokig. But as she watched him from the corridor, sweeping, wiping, pausing beneath the neem tree with eyes fixed on nothing, something inside her whispered, "See where he goes when no one is watching." She waited until his shift ended, until the crowd thinned, and the traders packed their goods. Then she followed, careful, quiet, half ashamed of herself. He walked with a slow rhythm, like someone who'd memorized each stone of the road. No phone, no bag, just a folded wrapper in hand, and his head bowed low. He passed the palm grove, turned left by the riverbank, walked another mile through the bush path, until he reached a hut. Not just any hut, it was hidden, quiet, but well kept. The fence was made of bamboo, the roof strong, the compound swept. Outside stood an old clay pot, filled with dried petals. Inside a small lamp flickered, clean, controlled. This was not a man of chaos, nor a man of filth. This was someone who lived with intention. She hid behind a tree, heart racing. Why does he live this way? She didn't knock, didn't call his name, just watched as he sat on his mat, pulled out a worn box from beneath the floor, and opened it. From where she stood, she saw a flash of gold. Not coins, a pendant, royal clean, glinting in the fading sun. Her breath caught. He was not who he claimed. She turned to leave, but her feet felt heavy, as if some part of her already knew, and had chosen to ignore it. That night, Obasi didn't light his fire. He sat in darkness, save for the small lamp flickering by his door. The gold pendant lay on the mat before him, next to a letter sealed in wax, unread, unopened, written by his late father. His fingers hovered over it, but he couldn't read it, not yet. Instead, he stared into the flame. Should I have told her? He whispered, but the lamp answered only in flickers. He thought of Lemmy's face the day she smiled at him beneath the neem. Pure, honest. Before the whispers, before the silence, before the gift. Now every glance from her felt weighed, filtered, tilted. He remembered how his mother used to test a pot of soup by dipping only one finger and tasting. She who dips with a full hand too soon gets burned. She'd say, Obasi had dipped. Now the fire licked his edges. But what hurt most wasn't her doubt. It was his own. He doubted that truth had power. He doubted that love could survive disguise. He doubted that Lemmy could still see the man inside the mask. Outside, the wind howled low and slow like a drum mourning its own silence. He picked up the pendant and pressed it to his chest. I'd give all this away, he said quietly. The land, the name, the wealth. If only she'd look at me again, like I mattered when I had nothing. But the night did not respond. And neither did she. The sky cracked open at midnight. Rain fell like grief, heavy, unapologetic, deep enough to drown silence. Lemmy sat on the floor of her room, staring at the pendant she had seen. It danced in her mind, swaying like a lie unspoken. Her thoughts were louder than the storm outside. He lied, but the words didn't comfort her. They didn't give her the anger she expected, only a cold ache behind her ribs. She wanted to be furious, to scream, to forget his name, but all she felt was confusion, and something worse, regret. She remembered the food bundle, the first smile, the calloused hands, the firelight in his hut. Was it all a trick? Or was he hiding not to deceive but to protect? She pressed her forehead to the cold wall, the scent of rain slipping through the window cracks. The storm reminded her of him, wild on the surface, still underneath. She whispered into the dark, "Why didn't you just tell me?" Then from the window she saw him. Obasi. He was walking toward the trade house. In the storm, no umbrella, no wrapper, just his back to the wind, and his eyes fixed on something unseen. She watched him disappear into the rain. He did not look up, did not hesitate, as if he was walking toward an ending, or maybe a beginning. Her hands trembled, and for the first time in days, her heart whispered a different question. Am I the one who turned away first? The rain had stopped, but it left behind the scent of something cracked open. The next morning, the air in Amoki was heavy, like a breath held too long. Inside the trade house, Obasi walked with his broom like it was the last weapon of a warrior too tired to fight. But he had decided, today, he would stop hiding. He stood before Chief Billa's office. The man's door was half open, his voice thick with arrogance as he laughed with two other staff. Obasi didn't knock. He stepped inside and placed a sealed letter on Billa's table. What's this? The chief sneered, not even glancing up. My name, Obasi said. Bella paused. My real name. Now the room was quiet. Obasi continued, voice steady. Obasi Ome, son of the late Chief Ome of Oduki village, owner of 5 lands east of the hills. You've met me before. Just not like this. Bella stood. What game is this? No game, Obasi replied. You fired 2 men last year for stealing from our supply chain. I was in the courtyard when it happened. I own the land they hid the goods on. Bella's face paled. You, Obasi turned to leave. Behind him, silence cracked like thunder. As he stepped into the courtyard, the sun broke through the gray clouds, spilling light on his shoulders like judgment. He didn't care who stared. He was no longer hiding, but in the wind that swept through the corridor, he still wondered, will she believe me? Or is it too late? By midday, the rumors had already bloomed. Obasi, the cleaner, was not just a man with a broom. He was Obasi Ume, heir of land and legacy, owner of more wealth than Chief Bala had ever touched. The trade house vibrated with tension. Some whispered apologies behind cupped palms. Others stared with a mix of fear and shame. But Bala, he burned. He stormed into the courtyard, eyes red, face slick with sweat. You lied, he roared. You tricked us. Obasi didn't flinch. I gave you the truth. You just didn't see it. You'll regret this. Bala spat. Then the final crack came. A voice from the back, Lum. She stepped forward, her eyes locked on Bala. The only regret here is yours. Gasps fluttered through the courtyard. You offered me favors. You mocked his hands. And now you stand here, stripped of the only thing you ever truly had, fear. Bala trembled. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Then a guard stepped forward, with a sealed letter. From the board, he said, you've been relieved of duty, effective immediately. The courtyard buzzed like bees disturbed from a hive. Bala crumbled, but no one reached to catch him. Obasi looked at Lami. She hadn't smiled, not yet, but she had stood beside him, and in that moment, it was enough. That evening, under the neem tree, where it all began, Lami waited. Obasi arrived slowly, as if unsure if he was still allowed to, but she stood, and for the first time in days, their eyes held each other without blinking. I saw your hut, she whispered. I knew you did, he said. I saw the pendant. I almost burned it. A beat. I thought you lied to me, she said. I did. By silence, not by intent. Another pause. And I thought I was wise, she whispered, until I realized, love doesn't always arrive wearing the clothes we expect. The wind rustled through the tree. Leaves fell like pieces of old pride. I came to tell you something. Obasi, I already know, Lami replied, but I still want to say it. She nodded. I love you, he said. She didn't answer. She stepped forward, took his hand, and placed it on her chest. There where the storm had raged. For days. It was quiet now, and in that stillness they both knew. Not every fire burns things down. Some fires rebuild. The next morning, all of Amoki was summoned. A town crier had walked the village paths before sunrise. His bell echoing, gather at the trade house. A truth is ready to speak. By midday the courtyard was full. Merchants, elders, servants, even children clutching roasted maize. They came with curiosity. They stayed for shock. Obasi stepped forward, wearing neither rags nor robes of royalty. Just clean cotton. His father's pendant hung bare against his chest. He stood before the crowd, not taller, just seen. My name, he said, is Obasi Ume. For months I swept these floors, cleaned your toilets, heard your curses, felt your silence. Murmurs rose. I hid not to deceive, but to understand. To find out who respects a man without coin. Who greets a stranger without knowing his name. He paused, and I found her. He turned to Lami. She gave me food when no one gave me eye contact. She shared her voice when mine was buried in dust. Lami stood still, tears lining her eyes, hands folded like prayer. The people watched, not her beauty, but her dignity. Then Obasi looked at the elders. I will not reclaim my father's seat, he said. I do not want to rule. I want to build, but I will no longer hide. He reached into his pouch and raised a paper high. I gift the eastern lands to build a school, a place where titles won't matter. Only kindness, skill, and soul. The wind shifted. The people stood in silence. Then, like a wave returning to sea, they began to clap. Slow, awkward, but real. In that moment, Amoke changed. Not because Obasi was rich, but because he proved even when covered in dust, a heart still shines. Weeks passed. The trade house no longer treated silence as weakness. New rules were made, new hands were lifted, and people whispered Lami's name with respect, not curiosity. She and Obasi didn't rush. They didn't build a palace. They didn't ride white horses. They simply began side by side, one gesture at a time. Each evening they returned to the neem tree, not to relive what was lost, but to plant something new. One afternoon, Obasi knelt, not with a ring, but with a small clay pot. Inside it, the first sapling from a rare fruit tree his mother once cherished. "Let's plant this," he said, "here where I first heard your voice." Lami took the pot, touched the soil. Together they dug. The sky above was clear. No rain, no thunder, just warmth. As the seedling stood in the ground, fragile and green, Obasi whispered, "Let it grow slower than love, but deeper than memory." She smiled. No crowd, no applause, just earth beneath their fingernails, and truth between their breaths. Years from now, they knew, the tree would shade two old people sitting hand in hand, and no one would know their story. Started with a broom, a whisper, and a gift wrapped in banana leaves. But the wind would know, and the tree would remember. If this heart-touching story moved you, don't let it be the last. Like, share among your friends, and subscribe to my channel. Please tell me in the comments what moment. I'd love to hear what stayed with you. I read yours every comment and make my next story better. Keep the emotions flowing. Another heart-touching story is just one click away.